Welcome to another edition of Powerful Words with Caleb. For Patriot Soapbox, I'm reporting here. I'm going to be covering a topic tonight, basically the options for the deep state enemy that desires to have Donald Trump removed at all costs, and that's what we're going to investigate here, folks, because we need to prepare our minds for everything that has gone before and what may be coming. So it's good for us to do this exercise and look through what the other side is thinking, because they are quite prideful and they will lay it out there and let us know exactly what their plans are. So if I may, I'd like to show you something very quickly that one of our Anons has prepared for me, and I really appreciate it. I'm really overwhelmed by it. It's a logo for Powerful Words with Caleb, done voluntarily by one of our Anons. I'm so grateful, that somebody would come up with something that's just arguably very inventive, and I really appreciate their talents and skills. I just wanted to give them a shout out. Thank you so much. Really appreciate that. Okay, so let's stop the share and go into other things here. Okay, we're going to share. This document. There you go. Got so many things open. Forgive me. Okay, these are the options that I could come up with in my head with regard to Donald Trump and their frustrations thereunto pertaining. Number one, stop him from being elected. In order to do that, we need to employ an enormous amount of money, FBI, DOJ, CIA. In this instance, they needed to answer to allied requests and produce that dossier or institute that dossier. Additionally, follow his taxes and use the media to destroy him at all costs. Option two, cancel, now that he had been elected, cancel the election results by manipulating the Electoral College. They need to do that with money, social engineering, and again, using the media at all costs. Number three, surveil the president and his staff to claim illegality had been done. That way he could be removed from office for the illegality. Used allied assets, outsourcing of intelligence, tech companies were involved, FBI, CIA, and the media. Then get the vice president to declare the 25th Amendment to Congress, which another option. They would do that through the special counsel, saying that Flynn lied to the vice president. Former president was involved. The staff, FBI, DOJ, allied and outsourced intelligence, Office of Director of National Intelligence, Attorney General, Director CIA, Director Sec State, and Director of UN, or the UN Council. Then, barring that, impeach the president. You'd have to do that through the special counsel, coming up with some information that was impeachable, high crimes and misdemeanors, and use the media for that. Kill the president. I'll leave that to a question mark, because we don't want to say that anybody has done that, but it's pretty clear that that is one of their options. And then bring down the president by any means possible, including starting a war. Deep state would be involved, global government sympathizers, bad seeds in Congress and the Senate, FBI, DOJ, CIA. The tech companies would have to be complicit, and the media would be involved. So on all these, what I did find was that there was a commonality of purpose in the media, that the media had to be involved in every single thing except for getting the president, the vice president, to declare the president unfit under the 25th Amendment. And so looking into that, I had to understand, if that's the only one they really didn't need the media for, well, how would they progress on that? And I did have the gauntlet thrown down on me today, and I'm going to stop the share here for a second. I had a noted liberal reporter of some talent and someone I respect told me point blank that in fact, I was kind of laughed at, which is, it's normal. I mean, I'm cool with being laughed at. You know me. It's okay. I laugh at myself harder than you're ever going to laugh at me. So get over it. And kind of said, gotcha, stung you, got one on you, ooh, burn, the reality is look, question was thrown out there. Look, I don't trust QAnon because it's obviously not top secret information. It's obviously was begun in the spring of 2018, and that I refuted immediately, which was what I was burned on, because they looked at the content of one of the Q drops and they refuted the content. And I said, no, I was claiming the date because they were incorrect. It was October of 2017 that Q started dropping. So I informed them of that, and then the gauntlet got dropped. And so I'm really curious about this gauntlet that's been dropped. The gauntlet is look, if you can show me before it became prevalent in the media regarding the 25th Amendment and how it was brought up, if you can show me where it was brought up before that date, then I will, quote, change my mind about Q. And I said, gauntlet dropped. I like it. Being a jarhead, you know me, man, don't drop the gauntlet, because I might just pick these croutons up and do a little salad tossing, The reality is look, I love it when you give me an opportunity. You're saying that, look, if this, then that. And so you're saying if I can prove that information, then therefore you will take an open mind to Q. And I do appreciate that, because if you are an honest person, then that's what you're going to do. So get ready, because it's coming. Okay, folks, you know me. I do my own research. So I have found something that I believe is really pertinent, and because it's pertinent, I'm going to show you right off, because it's exciting for me. And of course, my computer wants to lock it up, mister. We're waiting. At least we're not in Japan where the guy with the white gloves is pushing us onto the subway, right? Right? Okay, close that e-parser conflict. I gotcha. We'll close that. Please forgive me. Didn't mean to open up e-parser. Okay, we've got this document. Let me share this with you. Tech, my best friend. My best friend out here in the wilderness. Let me share this document with you. Here you go. Okay, this is an interesting one, and I had to be honest, folks, this aroused my competitive spirit. I had to stop for a moment and remember that, we are reporters, and we are members who are meant to be non-biased. Come on, computer, please. We are meant to be non-biased and to present the facts, and that's what I'm going to do here, because I want you folks to look at how the facts are being manipulated. And the facts being manipulated really goes to the importance of this option for them. So we're looking at a document here by Sean Illing. And this document says it was updated February 14th, 2019. Well, to me, that's a manipulation, because this document was actually prepared January 1 and released January 10th, 2018. Significantly changes the idea that this actually occurred at the beginning of 2018. And I want you to take that into account when we're looking at this as options. And for those folks who are easily upset, I please, get out your bottle of chill pills, take a big breath, and let's look at this one. Can the 25th Amendment be invoked to remove Trump from office? I asked one of its authors. Thank you, Sean, for bringing this information to us. We greatly appreciate it. We greatly appreciate you amending it, but we also want to look for the original material. We will review what you've put in here additionally, though. Former Deputy FBI Director Andrew McCabe told 60 Minutes in an interview on Thursday that the Justice Department officials have discussed invoking the 25th Amendment to remove President Donald Trump from office. Now, that's an update, because we know that just occurred recently, right? According to an op-ed in New York Times last September by an anonymous senior official in the Trump administration, this idea has also been floated before by people inside the White House. Now, anonymous official, September 5th, 2018. Okay, so let's keep that in mind. That was the first time this idea, quote, made the media papers. 25th Amendment to the Constitution, which was ratified in the aftermath of President John F. Kennedy's assassination in 1963, sought to establish a process whereby the president could be removed or replaced in the event of death or some other incapacitation. It was primarily about ensuring continuity in the government, but Section 4 of the amendment stipulates that Vice President and majority of the cabinet can declare the president unfit for office and then send a formal notice to the Speaker of the House and the President pro tempore of the Senate. Once that happens, the Vice President becomes the acting president. Now, when I read this paragraph, it immediately struck my head, and I'm certain that many of you had the same aha moment there, that's why they needed the vice president. That's why they had to have Flynn lying to the vice president. They needed the vice president to begin the gossip necessary or the discussions necessary with senior members of the cabinet in order to declare that the president's unfit and then notify the Speaker of the House. Okay, so that was what their obvious intentions were. Are we inching closer to that possibility right now? And if so, is there a legitimate case to be made that the 25th Amendment ought to be invoked? In January 2018, I spoke with Jay Berman, a former chief of staff to Senator Birch Bayh, of Democrat of Indiana, and one of the co-authors of the 25th Amendment. We discussed what the amendment means, how it was intended to be used, and if it can be plausibly invoked to remove Donald Trump from office. A lightly edited transcript of our conversation follows. Okay, now we have to take into account this is one of the co-authors of the 25th Amendment, folks. So there ain't anybody else who's going to be a better authority on this issue. However, you're going to find that some of these things upset you that follow. So please, like I said, get the chill pills ready. Sean Illing, you helped me write the 25th Amendment. Why was it created? Jay Berman, it was created very specifically in the aftermath of the Kennedy assassination, which was a real crisis point for our government and for the country. But it was also created at a moment that was perceived to be the beginning of the nuclear age, and so we recognized that we needed processes that fit the realities of a new world. Suddenly the stakes were higher, and the power of the presidency was enormous. We needed procedures and checks in places so that the government could still function in the event of an emergency or some other unanticipated crisis. Now, I need to do a sidebar on this, folks, because we're currently in a declared national emergency. We are currently in the evocation of Homeland Security Presidential Directive 20 and the NAA being evoked, and those were consequentially or subsequently the same types of documents that were developed for the event of a nuclear crisis or a major crisis that incapacitated the government, and they allow for business continuity procedures, continuity of government and states, and they allow for all those processes to continue in the event of a massive loss or even a loss of senior leadership, or the incapacitation of the president and members of Congress and of the Supreme Court. So what we're dealing with is they created this stuff maybe with the right intentions, but as always, when they create these laws, there are members involved who have other thoughts, and that's what you're going to see indicated here, which kind of aroused my competitive spirit, so to say. Okay, Sean Illing, but certainly one of the goals was to have the ability to remove an unstable or unfit president from office if it was deemed necessary for the sake of the country. Okay, so in this position, I see a reporter perhaps leading the discussion, but that's beside the point. Jay Berman, that was definitely one of the purposes. Okay, so there we are. It was one of the purposes of the 25th Amendment. Sean Illing, what does it actually say about the conditions under which a president can be removed from office? Jay Berman, well, that's the big question, isn't it? It's much more about process than it is about setting into the Constitution a trigger mechanism. The president has to be unfit to fulfill his obligations. Everything about the 25th Amendment implies that removing an elected president is primarily a political act. Of course, it should be informed by medical opinion on both of the physical and mental health of the president, but ultimately, the act of removing the president is a political act. Sean Illing. So how does that process get started? Who initiates the use of the 25th Amendment? Very clear question. Good one. Jay Berman. The mechanism for triggering, it is the vice president taking the first step and getting a majority of the cabinet to assert that the president is incapable of fulfilling his duties. If that happens, then they then send a formal written notice to the Speaker of House and to the President pro tempore of the Senate. Okay. If the president doesn't dispute this, the vice president becomes the acting president, but if the president disputes the declaration, then 2/3 of the Congress must agree that he's unfit for office in order for him to be removed. Sean Illing, It's relatively easy to determine that a president is physically incapable of performing his duties, but how do we decide that a president is mentally unfit? Fair question. Jay Berman. Everything begins with the vice president. The vice president has to determine in his own mind that the president can't meet his constitutional responsibilities because of a variety of mental reasons. If the 25th Amendment had included a set of circumstances in which the trigger mechanism said, he's wacko, he tweets insane things, he says insane things, we have to remove him, it never would have passed. So, we determined that it would be a political decision left to the vice president, the cabinet, and the Congress. That's how we designed it, for better or for worse. Sean Illing. Does it allow for Congress to act in the event that the vice president is negligent or unwilling? Jay Berman. The 25th Amendment didn't provide the specific trigger you're asking about, but it does authorize Congress under Section 4 to create a body that could examine the president's fitness for office. But in a partisan environment like this, it's hard to believe that this could ever happen. Sean Illing. I'll ask you straightforwardly, do you think the 25th Amendment should be invoked to remove Donald Trump from office? Jay Berman. No. Sean Illing. Why not? Jay Berman. At this moment, I don't think he meets the test of a president who's incapable of fulfilling his responsibilities. I think he is elected to do these dumb things. He hasn't become dumber or meaner since he was elected. This is who he was always been. This was who he was when he ran, and may well have been the reason people elected him. The problem is that we have a ridiculous electoral system and a bizarre set of circumstances that conspired to make this situation possible. But I can't honestly say that the 25th Amendment is the answer right now. The answer right now is impeachment. Sean Illing. Well, that leaves us in almost an absurd position. The country made a grievous mistake, we all know it, and yet we're forced to watch this tragic comedy unfold knowing how disastrously bad it could get. Jay Berman. Correct. Sean Illing. You're not cheering me up, Jay. Jay Berman. I think we ought to be talking more about how horrible our electoral system is, a system that commits the person with less votes to beat the candidates with more votes. This is the fundamental issue which people have neglected to think about in the rush to the 25th Amendment. None of this would have happened if we had a direct popular election, but we don't do in that way. And now we're trying to fit the 25th Amendment into the unique set of circumstances. Sean Illing, I understand all that, but we are where we are, and I'm trying to think through the options we have. The 25th Amendment, whatever its original intent, still allows for a determination to be made about a president's mental fitness. If someone like Trump, who each day appears more unhinged, more unstable, more deluded, cannot be declared mentally unfit, it is conceivable that anyone could. Jay Berman. It's very alarming what we're witnessing right now, but the bar for the 25th Amendment is set extraordinarily high. I agree that the president appears unhinged, but he's always just appeared unhinged, and he was still elected in a legitimate political act. If, for example, he decided he wanted to go to war with North Korea against the advice of literally everyone else, then we would be in a different territory in terms of the 25th Amendment. But right now, I just don't see it. I see more than enough grounds for impeachment, however. Sean Illing, perhaps, but for the partisan reasons you mentioned above, impeachment is equally unlikely to happen unless the Democrats retake Congress. Jay Berman, I never suggested we were in a good place. We're in a very bad place. I sleep worse every night knowing Donald Trump is president, but I don't think we can find some shortcut for dealing with that. Should we be talking about the 25th Amendment at all? Absolutely. I think there should be changes to the 25th Amendment to make it more viable and applicable to today's world. I'm not saying that in terms of Donald Trump, but I'm saying to the world we live in. I think we need to empower Congress further to act in a responsible and timely way. But again, there is a mechanism in the 25th Amendment already that permits Congress to do something. But I'll repeat what I said earlier. Would you trust this Congress to do its job? Sean Illing, at this point, I wouldn't trust Congress to make a cup of coffee. Jay Berman, exactly. Sean Illing, if you sat down to rewrite the 25th Amendment today, what would you change? What would you add? Jay Berman, I would amend it to actually require that in the process of determining if the president is fit for office, that there be some professional medical input on an ongoing basis, but some commentary on what the guy did yesterday, not some commentary on what the guy did yesterday, because every day he does something crazy. That's one way to make it more relevant for a circumstance like the one we're now in. I certainly prefer that to what we have now, which is knowing this guy is crazy but unable to prove it. Okay, so let's stop that share and let's have a discussion for a moment on this. We've looked over the options. We've looked over the fact that they don't need the media necessary to invoke the 25th Amendment, but now they've gone to the writer of the 25th, one of the writers of the 25th Amendment, and realized that it's just not going to be applicable in its current status. Now, I've spoken to lawyers, and I was laughing with Adam Winkler about it when I said, if the facts are against you, you argue the law. If the law is against you, you argue the facts. And he added the third line for lawyers, which is, if they're both against you, you pound the table. And we both laughed about that. But it appears that a fourth option exists within this current environment in politics, and that is, if we don't like it all and it all is against us, what we'll do is we will evoke social engineering through human ecology, through the media, and through our politicians, and we will just change the rules and change public opinion to match the outcome that we'd like to see. So we'll just manipulate the variables in the componentry. To me, that's not America. When I if I could for a moment, no offense to these folks, but if I could for a moment just for a moment review this in an objective fashion. Okay. It's very clear that they exercised every single option they could imagine to stop Donald Trump from being president and to avoid bringing Hillary Clinton up on charges that were valid because she was going to be their president. They tried everything, including it apparently gathering together with allies to use outsourced and insourced intelligence in order to manipulate the process. Even bringing in characters, a cast of characters from overseas, perfectly hand-picked and vetted to play appropriate roles. But regardless of the roles they played, even that information became relevant and salient to the current situation at hand, because it really developed into what's clearly a global coup d'etat against this current president. Now, they've tried all the options that they can imagine. And now we have gone through an article where one of the writers of the 25th Amendment has clearly stated that the president was elected to do dumb things, and that it's a tragedy, an enormous tragedy, and that it's absurdity, and we elected this president. So the dumb things that he was elected to do, we elected him to do. It's a legal process, and we hold the power to elect the president. And it went through the Electoral College, which they were happy with as of the last election because they won. But now they want to change it. So, folks, I'm looking at this article, and I'm feeling for the other side. I'm really feeling for them because they're slowly but surely losing every bit, every scrap, every remaining thread, every out, every escape hatch, every single salient point of logic and fact that they can use to perhaps write a different picture, an alternate agenda, an alternate story of what is currently or what has preceded in recent past. It's quickly, the rug, so to say, is quickly being pulled out from under them. And I can imagine the loss of balance is unnerving. And even today, when I'm bringing up salient points with people to this point who have respected me, I get mocked immediately, instead of what real thinking people do, which is share facts and share opinions. What people who are losing the argument do is share demagoguery and name calling. And so what I've just done here is I've showed a relevant progression through the options as I could lay them out. Now, there may be others that come up, and I know that there are future options that come up, like changing the election, manipulating the election, bringing in immigrants, things like that, things that need to be considered on the outside. But I think I've done a pretty fair job of laying out the story, the real truth, the truth of what has occurred. And I pray that folks out there find it very difficult to avoid the truth in this content, and that they begin to start craving a glass of water to take that red pill with, so that they might be disconnected from the matrix machinery. And, I feel for you, because the realization that you've been residing in the dark, and you really have tried to reside in the dark for longer than you ought to, is a horrible realization. We were told many lies, and it broke my heart when I found out, those people that I believed were my representatives were never my representatives, and that they did awful things in the name of righteousness. And, I'm accountable for that. I thank you again for coming tonight. And, as always, we have to look forward, and we're going to take this country back. It's going to be given back to the people. And very soon there are going to be a number of people coming from the other side who cannot ignore the truth any longer. And they're going to have to, as in this document, in this review, in this small presentation, the facts are becoming unavoidable. They're becoming overwhelmingly powerful. And at some point, they're going to have to come to us and say, hey, tell me more. And so are we ready for that? Are we ready to not just demagogue them or look to them and say, I told you so, and call them a bunch of names and be just like, treat them just like we were treated, demagogued and looked at and one-sided in the media? Because the media is coming down, and we're going to be it. So, folks, I just want you to know, I may not agree with you, but I love you and I respect you enough to listen to what you have to say. And at the end of the night, we need to part company and determine that we're just going to have to agree to disagree and come back tomorrow and shake hands. Well, amen, because that's where I'm at, and that's how this country was formed. We can't get anything done across this fictitious illusion of an aisle that they've created in order to keep us in conflict. This conflict was manufactured to divide us so that we might constantly be arguing. And look what it's produced. It's produced a Congress that is ineffectual. It's paralysis in the making. And so it's time for us to take back this country, we the people. And when we the people take back this country, we need to do something different with it. And that means we need to exercise our right to free speech, but we also need to exercise our right to listen. And I'm here to listen to you. I'm not here for you to call me names, because frankly, that means your argument is weak. And so I love you and I care for you and I pray for you. And I thank the Lord for having the opportunity to come before you tonight and give you another small episode of Powerful Words with Caleb. And folks, look forward to further episodes coming soon. Many with my friends and colleagues from Patriot Soapbox. We thank you for listening to us and continuing to give us your attention. Wonderful evening.